One of the hardest things about telling the Kryptonian epic in this style through these videos is that a lot of the more nuanced long-term payoffs sort of work backwards. All of the DC Comics characters featured in the Kryptonian epic have been redesigned around the idea that Clark is the protagonist of one story. Even though Aquaman is very important in the story, it is ultimately an idea for Superman. And this whole thing is a big Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings style story about Superman. He's the protagonist. All of the ancillary stories of the Kryptonian epic, the Aquaman story, the Krypton story, the Zatanna story, the Blue Beetles trilogy, they all exist to fold back into the center. They're all meant to connect back into Superman's story. For instance, a story like Freeze Test Run, even though it's really about introducing the Flash and Mr. Freeze, is ultimately a story that features their relationships to Clark Kent and the world he lives in. The things that happen in Freeze Test Run are centered around Victor Freeze, but ultimately it's all about Clark. But since I've been telling it in this weird way, the ways these ancillary stories dovetail back into the main Superman story isn't always immediately apparent. And that's why I've refrained until this video to explain Aquaman at the depths of madness, as well as Superman Do-It-Yourself's insane third act. Superman Do-It-Yourself is the third of the 5 main stories of the Kryptonian epic, the Superman stories. The first one is Superman, American Alien, which details how Clark became the person he is, and also met a lot of the people who will shape his experience as Superman in the epic. Superman, Agent of Batman, is about Clark's ill-fated mentorship and alliance with the deranged billionaire Bruce Wayne, also known as the Batman. And then Superman Do-It-Yourself is really where the DC universe comes together. It represents a nexus point of all of the ancillary stories so far. I've detailed a lot of Do-It-Yourself in the epic, but I've stayed away from the third act. So let's briefly break down what Do-It-Yourself is going into the third act. The first act of Do-It-Yourself is a sequel to the Green Arrow Riddler story, The Queen Prince. It represents that story dovetailing back into the main canon. Oliver Queen first showed up in American Alien issue 3. The Riddler first showed up in The Queen Prince, Edward Nygma. The Queen Prince, for those of you who don't know, follows the story of Oliver Queen, a billionaire whose life is destroyed by a corporate raider named Dr. Sivana. Think Tom from Succession, except for also kind of Hannibal Lecter. And the way that guy, Dr. Sivana, manipulates an analyst and an accountant named Edward Nygma, a brilliant but flawed mind, to help him take over the Queen family company. Now, of course, by the third act of The Queen Prince, Sivana has totally lost control. Being stranded on a desert island for years has turned Oliver Queen from a cokehead idiot Nepo baby into the fucking Green Arrow. He's now an extremely dangerous, skilled, smart, thoughtful, cokehead, airhead, Nepo baby.
Surprise, bitch! It's the Green Arrow!
Edward Nygma, meanwhile, through his encounters with an assassin named Floyd Lawton, as well as Slade, Deathstroke the Terminator, another assassin hired by Sivana, let's just say Ed Nygma has undergone some radical personality and lifestyle changes. He's begun to build Saw-like traps based around riddles in an effort to get back at the people who cornered him. However, doing that, he often puts innocent people in the line of fire in his effort to get back at Sivana. So by the time he finally kills Sivana with a big Riddler trap at the end of The Queen Prince, he's a criminal, and he has to deal with a guy named Batman, who I think I've talked about before. What's really crazy is technically The Queen Prince dovetails into the main story in the middle of Agent of Batman, on the night of the Killing Joke, when Edward Nygma takes control of that bridge in Gotham and Clark ends a hostage situation by hugging him. Showing Eddie goodwill in the moment in Agent of Batman, where he's moments away from murdering a bunch of hostages, has a permanent effect on Eddie's life, and also earns Clark a tremendous amount of goodwill and love from Eddie, who, while in Arkham, basically asks to talk to Superman every day. but he never believed it was gonna happen. The phrase do it yourself comes from a conversation that Lois has with Clark near the beginning of Do It Yourself, where Wonder Woman and the Flash have both to a degree shown up. Lex Luthor's Justice League doesn't exist yet, except for these people are sort of being test run, for lack of a better term, by Luthor. Clark doesn't know what to do about it and says he feels like he's lost on Mount Olympus. Lois essentially says, after learning his identity in Agent of Batman, Clark, you can't go to Mount Olympus. You're gonna have to do it yourself. And that puts the incentive into Clark to reach out to Edward Nygma, who leads him to the Green Arrow. So by the end of the first act of Do It Yourself, you have the Riddler and the Green Arrow teamed up with Superman. Next act of Do It Yourself, the second act, is Riddler figures out who Blue Beetle is. Now, the last time we saw Blue Beetle and Zatanna, they were cornered at the end of the Blue Beetle story by the Suicide Squad as the National Guard came into Bloodhaven, and Luthor intended to have Ted Kord's head on a fucking stick, and Zatanna's too, if he could get it. In this dire moment, the dark ending of the third entry in the Blue Beetle trilogy, surprise motherfucker, that's actually the middle of Do It Yourself. Clark saves Ted and Zatanna and kills the Suicide Squad. How am I doing?
Great.
Floyd Lawton has been a major antagonist in Freeze Test Run, in Z the Magical Girl limited series, and he's mentioned in Agent of Batman, but his death in the middle of Do It Yourself represents a major turning point for Clark and Luthor. Clark has now fully stepped into the role of leader of this team. Clark's killing of the Suicide Squad essentially cripples Luthor's ability to take people out at will. Luthor for years had this group of mercenaries that was replaceable other than Floyd that he could send out to kill whoever he wanted. The idea that all of them and Floyd would get killed in like 10 minutes, Luthor officially is scared of Superman. The idea of creating the Justice League is built in that moment, out of a terrified reaction to, oh, Superman's willing to just fucking kill my guys? That's new for Luthor. And he doesn't have that idea corrected, even though Superman killing the Suicide Squad leads to Clark having an extremely painful and hard conversation with Pete and Lois, who both kind of say, Superman just can't, just kill a bunch of guys. That's not really what you can do as Superman. That's bad vibes. What's funny is that, you know who didn't care about the Suicide Squad? Clark's new friends. Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, who has no problem killing people, the Riddler, a literal serial killer, Zatanna, fueled by hatred and rage, who would have killed Floyd herself if she'd thought to have the chance and hadn't already been fucking shot in the stomach. Oh, and of course, Ted Kord, a right-wing cop. The Blue Beetle doesn't generally kill people, but he's not terribly upset about the bad guys dying. In fact, Clark wiping out the Suicide Squad really helps him get in good with his teammates, a group of people from totally different backgrounds. They now all think Clark's the man. He's the guy who brought them all together. Even though Clark Kent isn't a natural leader, and Eddie and Lois, who by the way, fucking hate each other. Lois cannot fucking believe he actually got the serial killer all the way on the team. He was supposed to ask him who Green Arrow was. He wasn't supposed to, what are you doing, Clark? What are you doing? This guy has killed innocent people, Clark. Now we're hiding him? What is the point? This moment is a really good juncture to highlight the ways each of these characters counterpoint Clark and have been redesigned to counterpoint him. Zatanna is someone who is almost as powerful as Clark, but unlike Clark, who gets steadily better and better with his powers as the Kryptonian epic goes on, Zatanna's powers almost always go out of control. She's totally reactive in a way Clark is not. That forces him to level up maturity. Ted is a really smart, strategic, quiet man. He doesn't have the warmth Clark has. A lot of people would kind of think Ted Kord's an asshole. He's sort of this broody, quiet, intense man. But my God, having wisdom on the team shows that Clark has places to go, has things to learn. Clark admires Ted, not for his broody, badass attitude, but for the fact that he saved Bloodhaven. The Blue Beetle, more so than any of the other superheroes in the Kryptonian epic, was effective at what they did. Ted came up against a completely corrupt police department, wiped them all out in the first entry of Blue Beetle. Then he came up against the fucking mob and a super villain, big jacked up blockbuster dude who'd given himself drugs to be like almost as strong as a Superman. No. Ted broke both his arms. And then, of course, in the third entry of the Blue Beetle saga, Ted went toe-to-toe with Lex Luthor and Batman. So this guy is a success. Bloodhaven is a shimmering city of the future, a utopia, constantly repaired by Blue Beetle nanites, running on its own internal socialized currency called Beetle Coin. Like, literally, Blue Beetle created a nation state out of a city people thought was a war zone, and he did it in fucking 3 years. Clark hero worships this guy. And the only reason Ted really found the inspiration to do this is because he saw Clark on TV. That's the same reason Zatanna became a pop star instead of being a scarred, fucked up homeless lady, the way Lex left her after he burned her face, and I'll explain all that eventually. I also wanted to play with the idea that someone who is invulnerable and who is very good-natured would be able to interface with dangerous people in a way that defaults their various personality quirks. So Eddie's narcissism, in the face of Clark's glowing affection for him, separate from the murders, it's totally sated. You can't get better for Eddie than having Superman tell you're a genius. Like, it feels good for him. Clark admires Eddie while at the same time recognizing that, Eddie's got a lot going on with him. So that teaches Clark nuance and how to be gentle with sharp and frightening personalities. And then, of course, Ollie is a playboy who gives no fucks about anything. Clark's all about responsibility and accountability. Having this dude have unlimited money now behind Clark, who's been middle class his whole life, changes the dynamic again. And of course, we see more of that in Toyman and For All Mankind, and most notably in Endangered Species, which is basically a sequel to Do It Yourself.
It's because you're a billionaire, dude. You can just do whatever you, even into Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Okay, but why does it have to be about privilege? Like, that's you making it about that. That's like
You're
from
still
your
like,
head. You're putting that
have
on
every
me.
option
Because
you're
even
so
though I
used
think
to
about
having
that.
I'm from a farm, dude.
So the end of the second act of Do It Yourself is all about building these dynamics. Also the fallout of the murder is a strong word, but the killing of the Suicide Squad. This brings us to the third act of Superman Do It Yourself. Clark remembers meeting Arthur Curry, the eco-terrorist murderer called the Aquaman, and having a pretty meaningful exchange with him in Superman Agent of Batman. Clark believes in his heart that if he can get to this guy again, just maybe, there's a chance he would join up with Clark instead of staying rogue, or worse, joining up with Luthor. But to understand what comes next, you need to understand Krypton, Zod's masterpiece, a story about an alien world that became a utopia after an AI took over the whole planet. But then, after 100 years of peace, a deranged performance artist took control of the cultural zeitgeist and started a war between the people and the machine, which led to him creating a twisted monster known as the Super Hybrid. So a pod got launched towards Earth, but it was damaged by Zod. And part of it would go down and make a base, and the other part of it was supposed to find the dominant life form on that planet and copy it and mix it with Kryptonian DNA. These two parts got broken. So one part came down after reaching Earth about 500 years in advance of the other part. The part that was supposed to build the base went down first. The part with the little baby Clark egg, seed pod is what they're called in it, just kept rotating the Earth in a deteriorating orbit for hundreds of years. But that base part that came down, there's an easier way to do this.
The impact was seen by the crew of a human prison ship and led to a devastating shipwreck. The sole survivor, a lone human criminal, discovered the extraterrestrial fortress in the ice. Believing he had died and gone to hell, the brutish man was surprised when he was chosen as malfunctioning Brainiac Prime's base mind. Given superhuman powers via Kryptonian nanotechnology, the criminal believed he had made a deal with the devil and chosen as a messiah of evil. The madman took the name of Vandal Savage. He miraculously fought his way back to human society, but try as he might, the now immortal criminal could never find his way back to the icy gates of the Vanguard home. Brainiac Prime was confused. Abandoned by its base mind, disconnected from the Horizon pod, and unable to contact Krypton, the infant intelligence sent out a single Brainiac drone. It found a suitable location off the coast of Greenland. There, malfunctioning badly, it spent centuries building an automated satellite city on the bottom of the Earth's ocean. Which was, of course, received by Darkseid. The tyrant had grown desperate in his old age as his corpse planet continued to decay. All of his destruction had yet to vindicate the death of his family, had yet to reveal his true purpose. Now, believing his final destiny to be within reach, Darkseid left Warworld and arrived on Earth, only to be promptly shot down by damaged Brainiac Prime.
Gee willikers, what was that?
I think it crashed down by the old Starlight Emperor diner.
Stand back. I think there's something moving in there.
We come in peace, buddy. We come in peace.
Stranded, crippled, and unable to communicate, the once mighty Lord Darkseid found himself imprisoned by the United States government at an installation called Area 51, after his craft crash-landed in the desert outside of Roswell, New Mexico. Oceanographer Tom Curry witnessed the Kryptonian cannon fire from beneath the sea and became convinced that he'd found the legendary city of Atlantis. Chartering a submarine, Curry and his pregnant wife Mera ventured deep beneath the Arctic waters. They found this hidden city not to be a paradise, but instead a dizzying labyrinth of malfunctioning otherworldly wonders. The deranged Brainiac drone had been busy, endlessly preparing for a Kryptonian colonization that would never arrive. Mera found herself trapped in a hybridization chamber, accidentally activated by the human presence, and the unborn child inside her was hybridized with the various species of the ocean that the Brainiac drone had cataloged in its time on Earth. The process tragically killed Mera Curry, but led to the birth of her son, Arthur, now the most powerful human ever to have existed, a genetically perfect hybrid of 10,000 species, custom designed to be the ultimate life form on a planet dominated by the sea. But the ordeal had driven Tom Curry, now father to a demigod, into madness. He destroyed the Brainiac drone with a stick of dynamite and fled the sunken city, obsessed with the technology he brought back from the sea. Curry fostered a cult in the town of Innsmouth, calling the destroyed drone Cthulhu and the structures under the sea Rilya. The cult believed that by using the technology they could turn themselves into a race of superhumans. Of course, despite all their rituals and sacrifices, Tom Curry's son Arthur proved to be the only superhuman among them. The rest, being adults and hybridizing with fish, were turned into monstrosities, just as Jack's had always predicted. Arthur Curry was raised mostly in seclusion, taught that he was the Messiah who would lead humanity back to the sea. But the cult's various illegal activities drew the attention of a human law enforcement agency called the FBI. In a daring escape, Tom and his superpowered teenage son fled into the ocean, as the town was decimated by the conflict between the agents of the FBI and the cult's suicidal loyalists. The FBI's head investigator on the Innsmouth case, Dr. Stephen Shin, became enamored with the cult's eldritch beliefs. Seemingly validated by the recovered Kryptonian technology, Shin stole the wreckage of the drone, committing treason, creating armor built with the technology and acting on the ethos from the Innsmouth cult. The homicidal Dr. Shin began to identify as Black Manta. For 2 years, he hunted the Curry family across the oceans of the world, finally catching and killing Tom Curry in a fracas on a cruise liner off the coast of Thailand. Arthur Curry, now 20 and disillusioned with the world, stalked, fought, and killed Black Manta, burying his armor in a mine shaft in Japan. Curry then fled to the abandoned underwater city that had fractured his father's life, where he would live in isolation for years, lashing out with incredible power at anyone that dared enter his domain. But the situation on Earth at this point was rapidly changing. Desiring to manipulate and control the emerging tide of superheroes, the cold and clinical Dark Knight first befriended Clark, and then located Curry, finally engineering a confrontation between the two titans.
So yeah, what the fuck? Holy shit! Darkseid's been on Earth this whole time? And yeah, that's also who Vandal Savage is. He's a castaway criminal from fucking 500 years ago. A murderer with no remorse who believes he's been chosen as a saint by God. Or maybe the devil? Vandal was shown the same shit that Darkseid was shown. A disaster on a planet that led to death and destruction. Ultimately, they both had kind of religious-y takes on it. They think all the aliens dying on Krypton were angels. Like, Darkseid and Vandal have a lot in common. They're both Brainiac base minds, they've both been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years, they both kill with impunity, and they both believe they are backed up by a higher divine power. They're not. They're just evil science fiction bad guys. Because Clark left Arthur with a way of contacting him, but no attempts Clark has made to contact Arthur have worked, he has Eddie and Lois put their heads together. Now, Eddie and Lois hate each other. Lois really is afraid of Eddie. She thinks the idea of having the smartest man in the world, a serial killer, on your superhero team telling Superman what to do seems totally fucking psychotic. Clark's like, no, he's a good guy. He's a really good guy. Also, Eddie doesn't like Lois because Lois won't acknowledge that Eddie is, you know, the best and smartest and most brilliant and most wonderful guy ever. Clark will, though. It's only 7 people who are dead. Like, come on. They're just like 3 of them were pretty bad people. What about the other 4, Clark? Well, he was in a bad situation, Lois. Clark's relationship with Eddie is an in and out of the entire Kryptonian epic. Clark really believes in this guy and believes in his ultimate ability to do the right thing. Clark also really believes his narcissism. He really believes that this guy can do anything, can remember anything, can solve any problem. And maybe he can. Eddie and Lois, working together, discover that Arthur Curry, the only name Clark has for Aquaman, is actually the son of Tom Curry. Tom Curry's worth talking about because he was a member of this super wealthy generational family in America, almost like the Rockefellers, and he was the last of them. Now, you saw what happened to Tom and the legacy of Innsmouth and Amnesty Bay in the cartoon. Eddie and Lois are discovering that in real time. Working together, Lois and Eddie end up finding these old FBI files that have been mostly redacted, but they talk about a gulf in Massachusetts called Amnesty Bay, and within that, a town called Innsmouth that doesn't appear on any map. They can't even find it on satellite imagery. In fact, the area where it should be seems distorted and scrambled, showing the same tree repeating again and again all the way up to the water. For the first time ever, the society rolls out as a group. Oliver Queen is under investigation for being the Arrow vigilante. Riddler is literally supposed to be in Arkham. Zatanna is a world-famous pop star who is currently technically missing after the National Guard raided Bloodhaven, and Ted is basically the most wanted man in America, the Blue Beetle vigilante, the guy who reformatted Bloodhaven without permission from any government. I mean, it's a motley fucking crew. Lois is also convinced Eddie is gonna play them and try to kill them, so she insists she come too. How Pete Ross ends up on this trip, I think you'd have to ask Pete that, because at this point, he's out of work, he's moved to Metropolis to try to hang out with his best friend Superman. He's thinking about trying to start a business, but doesn't know what that business would be. And when he meets Oliver Queen, those guys really get along and really enjoy making fun of Clark and Ted together. So Pete kind of comes along on a superhero mission to an obscure, hidden, possibly haunted town because he made good friends with Ollie. He's kind of Ollie's +1 to this. They arrive in the woods outside of what used to be Amnesty Bay. Blue Beetle's little like hovercraft spaceship thing, the Bug, can't fly here. There's some sort of electrical interference in the air, some sort of strange energy. It makes Clark sick too, and he can't fly either. Superman's powers in the Kryptonian epic are based around electromagnetic fields and the manipulation, the bioorganic manipulation of electromagnetic fields. That's why he's strong, that's how he shoots beams, that's how later he can cool things down, and that's also how he flies. So when Clark tries to fly in these woods, he goes like smashing into things, can't control it. So one of their major advantages is already almost gone. In fact, the Blue Beetle armor's technology gets all spun out in these woods too. It's fucking full-on Blair Witch Project with superheroes. Ollie, however, spent years in the jungle. He uses his natural instincts to slowly lead them through the winding, distorting woods as all of them begin to become nauseous and disoriented until they finally come out into the rotting, decrepit town of Innsmouth. The town of Innsmouth has remained almost untouched since the FBI raided it, leading to a massacre of both FBI agents and Innsmouth's distorted, deformed citizens, the experiments of Tom Curry attempting to recreate the marvel of Aquaman. Abandoned for over 4 decades, Innsmouth is now a rattling, creaking shell of its former self. Wind screams through narrow alleyways and whistles in bullet holes in walls. Shattered windows lead into dust-covered, empty tombs of homes. Doors have been busted down. There's fire damage to half of it. Not a sign of life, although they do keep hearing strange sounds. As they work their way deeper into the town, we are now essentially in like a atmospheric Carpenter-style thriller horror movie, except for the protagonist is Superman, as they sort of like spook their way through Lovecraft country. When Clark tries to use his X-ray vision to look through the town and see if there's any signs of life, he discovers that almost all of these primitive-looking structures have been lined with lead. That lead, on a spectrometer, is still glowing with electromagnetic radiation, a specific electromagnetic signature, familiar to Clark. This is Green 71, kryptonite, the mysterious off-Earth element that in Free's test run, Luthor's scientists used to reshape reality and mutate the human genome. An alien kind of philosopher's stone that can shatter the laws of physics into a million different pieces. What was it doing here? Well, you know, because you saw the cartoon. He brought it from Riley, the Aquamans. You remember the cartoon. We just did the cartoon. They work their way through town to a church located right on the water. We know this place from At the Depths of Madness. This is the Cthulhu-worshipping church of Tom Curry, but now it stands as a skeletal husk, although there is the noise of thrumming, strumming energy coming out from inside of it. That's when they hear the screech of a megaphone.
Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating.
Holy fucking shit, that's Gerard Schugel. For those of you unfamiliar with Gerard Schugel, he is the Ultra Humanite. Pretty much the first supervillain ever to exist in the universe of the Kryptonian epic. Shugel is a homicidally insane, but incredibly brilliant polymath whose real superpower is that he gives no fucks. This is a guy who made a career off working for despots, dictators, and criminals. Oh, you need a new way to torture someone? Gerard Shugel. You want to reformat someone's DNA so that their teeth grow up through their eyes? Gerard Shugel. This guy has lived in the criminal underbelly for years and years and years, and it was his work that brought together the insane roster of Luthor's powerhouse laboratory, Ace Chemicals. Shugel is the worst guy. There are a couple of characters within the Kryptonian epic who I would describe as out and out evil and bad. Uncomplicated, completely villainous, completely psychotic and insane characters who have no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and Shugel is one of them. There's only like 3. Literally, if you ask Shugel why he does the things he does, experiment on children, kill animals and people in mass through his negligence and scientific arrogance, he would explain that it's because he thinks it's cool. Shugel's path to becoming a supervillain began when he found traces of Alzheimer's in his own DNA. In order to change that, he experimented on himself, slowly transforming himself from a person, think Willem Dafoe with a big smile, into a monkey man. He turned himself into a monkey man by replacing his DNA with bonobo DNA, Rhesus blue monkey DNA, all different types of simian DNA. And yeah, it did fix his Alzheimer's, but it also turned him into like a hoo-ha, hoot-hoot monkey guy.
Silencio, mono, por favor!
Stop calling me a monkey!
When we last saw Gerard Shugel, he was fleeing the disaster at Ace Chemicals. And the monkey stuff had already been going on. It doesn't give him any superpowers, but seeing him by surprise, standing on the roof of this skeletal church, holding a megaphone, he looks pretty fucking supervillainous. Shugel greets the society. This is where he's been hiding out. Surprise, surprise, motherfuckers. Luthor's already been here and had found Innsmouth years earlier due to his government contacts, but research into the town never went anywhere. Shugel's only there because he knows it's not on any map, and after the disaster at Ace Chemicals, he's a pretty hot commodity. The group is bewildered to see him. Only Clark and Lois even fucking recognize this guy. And they have barely any time to process what's happening before he starts setting off dynamite in the town. It was always his plan to destroy this place. And he's done a John Carpenter's The Thing. You know, remember in the end where they're throwing dynamite everywhere? He did that into town and has been living there waiting for someone to find him so he could blow it up as he left. So we enter this fucking sick sequence of them running through the town as these old dilapidated buildings explode, except for they're lined with lead. So all of the wood parts of them basically blow off, revealing the lead skeletons as fire and dynamite goes left and right, and Clark can't fly. So they're just like running through the street like this. Ah! Ah! Oh, shit! Ah, fuck! Clark tries to use his eye beams to get Shugel, and they light on fire while coming out of his eyes because of the electrical disturbance. Ollie splits from the group and tries to get an angle on Shugel for an arrow, except for Shugel is forced down a little bit into the church, only to run into the blue fucking beetle. The 12-foot tall blue beetle armor comes crashing through the bones of the church, only for the ground under it to collapse as it falls into a hidden sublevel. Blue Beetle just too fucking heavy. Gerard gets ready to set off the final bit of dynamite, which would unquestionably kill Lois and Pete, who are trapped behind a bunch of burning houses, and then he gets shot in the back by Edward Nygma. Gerard falls off the roof of the church and escapes into the chaos, but Eddie had a gun this whole time? He wasn't supposed to have weapons, Clark. Yeah, but he saved us, Lois. He saved us. He shot Shugel. Maybe Lois is maybe right about Eddie. Although, we'll see where all that goes. Now that bombs aren't going off all around her, Zatanna finally has the concentration and time to use her powers. She slides a sheet of indestructible steel under the church and then lifts the whole thing into the air on a platform like a dollhouse before dumping it into the bay. She goes down to get Ted. Zatanna and Ted from the Blue Beetle saga have almost like a father-daughter relationship. You also have to keep in mind, just to like place us where we are in the epic, Zatanna has never been on like a superhero mission. She fought Blockbuster's guys in Bloodhaven, which involved a lot of like flipping cars and stopping bullets and doing cool witch things, but she's never been in like an active combat situation like this. So seeing Ted fall through the floor really rattled her and scared the shit out of her. You might ask, why wouldn't an all-powerful witch be able to stop a guy with a megaphone and a couple of dynamite plungers on the roof of a building? And the answer is, because she was scared. A key element of almost all of these superpowered characters within the epic is their emotional reactivity affects their ability to function. This is true of real people, it should be true of superheroes. Ollie wants to go after Shugel, but Clark notices that the area Ted fell down into is actually a lot bigger than it looked. And the group begins to climb down into an underground cavern filled with scavenged Kryptonian technology. That first trip, the death of his wife, where he threw dynamite behind him and left, was not actually Tom Curry's last trip to the city beneath the sea. He's been many times, created many things. One of them is on the wall. We see the glowing green energy of Green 71, and Clark begins sweating, becoming woozy, stumbling backwards as all of the machinery activates around him. Activates because of him. Whatever's happening here in the creepy cave beneath the destroyed church in the haunted town, it's reacting directly to Clark's presence. And it
just died.
What the fuck?
Hey, I bought a house. Had to delay everything because I had to move. So it was like this whole big production. Where was I? Oh my gosh. Okay, so they find under the church in the town, after the escape of Gerard Shugel, the ultra-humanite, who fucks off because he's terrified to fuck with the newly formed society, they discover underneath the church a portal built by Arthur's father, Tom Curry, who had discovered all the stuff down in Atlantis and made the cult, and the portal is still active. From beyond the portal, they can feel an icy wind. And of course, Lois is the first one to fucking push right into it. And when she goes through, she vanishes. Clark panics, follows her. The rest of the group follows him, and they are instantly launched through what feels like a tube of pure energy out into the tundra, the ice of the Antarctic in all directions. They're all suddenly freezing. Ted, in the Blue Beetle suit, pops out heaters, so space heats the whole group. Then Zatanna throws up glass walls around them to stop the winds. As the blizzard clears, a series of small sheds with a fence around it, all iced out, abandoned for years. The mists and ice clears to reveal a massive, bizarre, surreal, alien palace made entirely of ice, glowing up from the fucking center of the tundra, out in the middle of a vast expanse, towering over everything like a mountain or a skyscraper. The group knows this is it. Whatever was tied into the town, whatever was tied into the cult, this is all one thing. As they approach the alien ice tower, they see a figure. It's Arthur Curry, the Aquaman. He is fucking shocked to see them. Arthur has not seen Clark since Agent of Batman, when they decided they would loosely be friends. So for Clark and a gang of other freaks to have shown up in the middle of the fucking icy middle of nowhere, it's kind of fucked. Also, we get to see great Aquaman look here because it's Arthur who's like this hulking dude, but he's wearing all this like polar bear fur and grizzly bear fur and like seal skins. He's like covered himself up so he can be in the tundra. He looks like a fucking barbarian. He clocks Pete Ross and is like, okay, fuck this guy. Like, this dude hit me in the face with a shovel.
Oh, I see you brought a true warrior with you, a real badass.
The group is, of course, very fucking confused. Lois is like, what is this giant thing? And Arthur explains that he actually comes here a lot. He's come here since he was a child. He calls this place his Fortress of Solitude. He doesn't actually know where it is because there's so much ice tundra in every direction he's never been able to explore without risk of freezing to death. The one way Aquaman could potentially get killed because he's so fucking... He doesn't know why the government facility is there. It was abandoned when he first came here. His father took him here when he was a kid through the portal at the base of the church. He just comes here to meditate and to ponder the majesty of the Fortress of Solitude, this bizarre Byzantine structure of glowing blue and white ice and sparkling oily rainbow reflections. He doesn't even know who built this thing, but his dad thought it was the same God that his dad told him he was the Messiah of. If you remember in Agent of Batman, Clark dispelled the illusion of Arthur being the most powerful being on the planet, and that led to an uneasy truce. Well, that uneasy truce takes on a whole new depth, because when Clark approaches the Fortress of Solitude, it comes sliding and shaking open, the ice reforming to create an entryway into the massive palladium within. Lois tries to tell Clark to wait, but Clark can't stop himself, because there it is. There it fucking is, in the ice, plain as day. Whoa, boom, S. That's the symbol on the pod from when he was a kid. That's the only connection he has to his past. Clark isn't even 100% sure he's an alien. He just says that because it makes the most sense, because he fell out of the sky. Lobo said to Clark something about Krypton and all the other ones like him being dead, but he didn't seem to recognize him as one of the aliens, and he looks and feels like a human. He came to Innsmouth to try to find Aquaman, but now it's undeniable. These two men's pasts are linked in a way that neither of them understand. And Arthur watches in wonder as the newly formed society protests and Clark floats into the air and into the massive inner chambers. Frame me with the thing. And I'm going to come back. The inside of the Fortress of Solitude is almost like a cathedral. Different colors move through the ice as it energizes and activates for the first time ever. This thing has been here for nearly 500 years, and it's only ever had one visitor before this. But that's a story for later. Now Clark cannot believe his eyes. He is seeing images of an alien world play in the ice around him, the reflective walls being used like massive IMAX screens. Clark is becoming steadily more emotional as the rest of the group works their way in. He can feel that this place is connected to his destiny. This is answers. This is reality. All this Superman stuff has been in waiting for the real answers. What am I? Why do I have these powers? Who sent me here? Who is my family? Those are the questions at the heart of American Alien, even though they're unspoken, because we've watched Clark throughout the entire Kryptonian epic try to build a family around himself. If you've seen the Society Endangered Species, which comes 3 stories after this one, you know that eventually Wonder Woman and Aquaman both identify Clark as a brother. Brother. So this takes place chronologically before that, even though I'm releasing the video after. So I'm doing my emotional foreshadowing for you after I've already done the payoff. The Kryptonian epic is an imperfect format. It just is. But we're in it together, so take my hand. The way the Fortress of Solitude works is essentially it makes new pathways as you enter it. It melts its own ice to allow you to move through it. So eventually a promontory raises for Clark, almost like an altar, and he floats down onto it to see this giant display of all of this different ice-carved, fucking cool-ass Kryptonian technology that is clearly not built for human hands. He touches it, and a hologram comes up, and it scares the shit out of Clark, because it's a fucking slug monster. Kryptonians do not look like human beings. They're about this tall, and they look like this. They have like weird tentacle arms, and their faces are kind of hunched down and impacted, and this thing's face, Clark realizes, its face is the S. Clark knows, somewhere inside him, he knows that this hideous alien thing in front of him If it's not his father, it's something like his father. He can just feel it. And as the thing barbles and clicks and speaks in an incoherent language, Clark stares at it, trying to get any of it, trying to understand one thing, the final message from his father, and it's in a language his ears can't even decipher as language. Kryptonian sounds like weird crab noises. Lois approaches Clark, and Clark says, "I think it's one of me." A little red light starts flashing in the wall. Clark goes to the wall, and beyond it, through the ice, he can see like a black mirrored surface. He tries to pull the ice apart because he can see something moving behind it, a silhouette framed in the mirror. Oh my God, is that a living Kryptonian? Clark begins beating on the ice, steps back. Lois says, "Clark, wait." Clark goes, "No," like that, I could just, the ice wall melts. And tumbling out of the black oily surface is a living Kryptonian. It's ancient. You know how when crustaceans get old, they start to get all musty and crinkly, somehow hard and soft at the same time? Like if you touched their shell, it would be spongy, but then if you pressed too hard, it would crack like the top of a raspberry mousse and guts would come spilling out of it like an old lobster. That's this thing on the floor. It stands up immediately and does something and closes the gate it just came through and then turns to Clark. It moves right past him and goes to the controls and begins interfacing with the controls, then looks at Clark again. The rest of the society is way down there, working their way up the ice thing that Clark just floated over. Lois is trying to scramble up to him. The Kryptonian stops, observing Clark, and then from within its shell, it produces what looks like a canister with a little tiny spindle inside of it, and all over that, thousands of seeds. Weird seeds, though, mushy seeds. They look almost like embryos, but it's like an embryo inside of a peanut. It's real creepy and weird looking. The Kryptonian falls and prostrates itself before Clark, and then activates a translation machine on the console.
Oh, thank goodness! A living hybrid. I thought I would never see another Kryptonian again.
Clark's like, "What?"
Don't you understand? Your story is thousands of years in the making. I am but a humble scientist from Krypton named Mon-El. It was me who helped engineer the Horizons Project. Our plan was to spread Krypton throughout the universe, but then my partner Jor-El, your father, went power mad. He let loose a creature, a monster called Doomsday. The computer of the planet, a brainiac like the one stored in this very facility, if you'll help me access it, turned on the Doomsdays and destroyed Krypton. All because of your father. It was up to me to protect the legacy of Krypton. You see, I have many seeds that can be hybridized with the species of this planet. You can save your species.
Clark is like, "Whoa." The dialogue would all be better than this, but I'm giving you a flavor, right? Okay. His father was responsible for the destruction of Krypton? That sounds right. And sure enough, Mon-El says,
"Why do you think your pod escaped? It was because Jor-El is the only thing Jor-El cared about. Your father died on Krypton, but me and other noble Kryptonians escaped. It's your responsibility to help."
Clark realizes he's not a refugee from a destroyed world. He's the evil prince, the progeny of a monster who destroyed a planet. Clark is horrified as Lois finally climbs onto the platform. Mon-El explains that with just one drop of Clark's blood, they can use the hybridization machines to make all of these Kryptonians come to life as hybrids like Clark. Fulfill the glorious destiny Mon-El wanted for his planet and save the Kryptonian race. Clark's like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, this is all meant to be. Everything Arthur said about the prophecy, this is all real. It was all true. Lois, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened. I can't believe it. Lois is like, excuse me. Pardon me. Note. Okay, so you're emotional. We're in an alien ice palace. This is the biggest day of my life. This is hard confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence having existed on Earth with the human government's foreknowledge, Clark. This is huge, but you are making it about you. And what's really weird is that he is also making it about you. The one person who happened to come here was also the child of the person who destroyed the planet. Do you not want to fact check or wait a second or talk further to this guy before giving him your blood? She has a point. Normally when an alien falls out of a wall, the first thing you do isn't listen to a monologue, and the second thing you do isn't give it your blood. Clark turns back to Mon-El. You gotta come back to Metropolis with us. We gotta bring people back here. This is big, not just for Kryptonians, but for the human race. For years, this species has wondered if there's life in the stars, and now there is, and I get to be the one who walks the alien in. I don't have to be fucking a superhero anymore. I can be the representative of extraterrestrial contact with the human race. This is so big. Mon-El goes,
I think you're misunderstanding. It was your father's incompetence that led to the destruction of Krypton. Now you stand there and say, I will be an emissary to a new world? You think you're important, when in reality, you are an abomination. Your role is to give me your blood and allow me to ascend to where I was always supposed to be, with the planet kneeling before me!
Good translator on this Fortress of Solitude, because it's just an alien going and this big booming voice.
You're an idiot, like your father was, and selfish, like your father was. Mon-El, a fool! That I had to pose as him for even a minute disgusts me. I am the last living Kryptonian because I am the best Kryptonian ever to live. I'll have your blood one way or another, and you and the rest of this planet will kneel before Zod!
And fucking Green Arrow fucking takes him out from behind, kicks him into the wall. Fucking Zod, yeah, it's Zod, activates the Fortress of Solitude's defenses. Holy shit, ice spikes coming down. Zatanna has to go zoom, boom, 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 boom. Blue Beetle fucking smashing through ice with the armor, fucking blocking things. Aquaman almost gets frozen, and Pete has to fucking pull him back because now the entire Fortress of Solitude is coming in on them. Zod reaches for Clark, touches him once. Clark goes like this. Boom, just like that. Sends Zod flying backwards off the top of this platform. He hits a thing, lands down there. It's the last time we're gonna see him until Superman, the Starlight Emperor. Lois is like, we gotta get out of here. He turned this whole place on us. Clark is like, no, we have to stay. It's too important. Except for, no, they gotta fucking get out of there. He turned that whole place on them. The entire Fortress of Solitude, the interiority of it is shrinking. Superman can do a lot. These superheroes can do a lot. They can't do much having a mountain-sized ice fortress fall in on them. So they have to run out of there. Fucking 80s action movie. Stuff falling down. The end of Starship Troopers. You know the shit where like everything falling down and the characters are going? It's one of those. So I never thought I'd have to do the end of Do It Yourself myself because it was gonna be for the animated movie. But then David, the animator, had to go back to England. So I have a lot of like cool illustrations from all these moments, but life comes at you fast. And if there's one thing that's true about the Kryptonian epic, it's that it pours to fit a mold, the shape of water. They escape out into the little government outpost, except for all the ice is falling out from the ground from under that too. So Zatanna, Blue Beetle, and Clark have to get the others and launch into the air back towards the portal as the ice is collapsing downwards in every direction, creating a massive crater around the Fortress of Solitude. Man, they shouldn't have let Zod out of that wall. Just as they make it to the portal and swing through, the ice under that collapses, and a portal that has laid dormant for years and years to the answers behind Clark Kent's mysterious lore collapses permanently. And they are left in an abandoned, haunted ghost town to ponder their new connections to each other. Oliver Queen gets Zatanna and Blue Beetle set up in Metropolis. Secret apartments, superhero shit. We're doing it. We're a team. It's the society, baby. Arthur and Clark end Superman Do It Yourself with their second, real conversation as guys. Pete and Lois both want Clark to pursue the Fortress of Solitude, as does Arthur. The prophecy was real. Clark felt it. That all meant something. But Clark, if you know the Clark of the Kryptonian epic and seeing a monstrous alien tell him that his father destroyed a planet and then the monstrous alien had some kind of megalomaniacal breakdown and said he was an evil prince and that he was gonna make the planet kneel. In Clark's mind, he never needs to go back there again. He resolves to make something of himself on this planet, to erase whatever dark legacy destroyed Krypton. Maybe he'll never know. Maybe he'll have to let it go forever. Maybe everything that fucking alien said to him was a lie. I mean, he looks human. What was the thing it was saying about hybrid? What was it talking about? Clark's the only one who heard this thing say all that. Everybody else was down there. And Clark feels like, I don't ever need to see that motherfucker again. I'm Superman. And I'm ready for what's next. On television, a small private army has taken hold of a town in England. They plan to ransom one of the royal family when there's the noise of a distant sonic boom and a red blur snaps through the town, lighting a path of fire through tanks and gunmen, launching them in all directions. A moment, and then the tanks lift into the air, blown backwards by psychic force, as a man in a black coat named Manchester Black steps onto the scene. As people open fire on him, Manchester takes cover, only for a 7.5-foot tall woman to drop from a helicopter and kill 60 men with her bare hands and a sword. That night, Lex Luthor announces that superheroes are no longer rogue entities, that he has nobly saved from the wreckage at Ace Chemicals enough technology to create superhumans of his own. The Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Manchester Black. Superheroes are now a private enterprise, controlled by the most popular and trusted billionaire in the world. Lex Luthor's Justice League. Clark, watching the TV, looks at Lois. You see, now this is a priority. That's do it yourself, bitch. And then it goes right into fucking the Society Toy Man, and they gotta deal with the billionaire and the robots, and then they goes into Superman for All Mankind, and they gotta try to fight the Justice League, but the Justice League falls apart because Barry Allen turns on them. But oh no, Batman's gone insane because Batman Death Wish was happening during Superman for All Mankind, leading to the Society Endangered Species, where the society itself, the group, is fragmented and blown apart after it's revealed that the hybridization technology that created Aquaman, created Wonder Woman, also created Superman, created Cheetah, created Man-Bat, created Clayface, created Killer Croc, and et al. Woo! The Parasite 2! That means there is only one more main story left. How does it all end? What happened to Krypton? What is Project Starlight Emperor? And who is Darkseid? Let's fucking go. Kryptonian epic, Kryptonian epic.